Truth is back. R-Truth just shocked the entire WWE universe and attacked John Cena at MITB 2025. Nobody, and we mean nobody, saw this coming. Just when John Cena thought he had one last run, boom. Out of nowhere, R-Truth hit the ring and dropped Cena cold. You heard that right. R-Truth. The 24/7 Chaos King. The master of confusion. Just turned deadly serious. He didn't dance. He didn't rap. He walked down with purpose and ended Cena's moment. The man who's made us laugh for over a decade just made a career-altering statement. Is this a new side of R-Truth? A revenge arc? A legacy rewrite? Or is he just finally tired of being overlooked? One thing's for sure, the joke is over. Truth is back. Cut to crowd footage, gasps. Confusion. Chants. Silence. This wasn't a funny moment. This wasn't a meme. This was personal. At Money in the Bank 2025, John Cena made what looked like his final full-time appearance. Grateful. Poised. Ready to pass the torch. He waved to the fans. Smiled. Spoke from the heart. And just when it seemed like the curtain was about to close, the music hit. Not Cody. Not Theory. Not Orton. It was R-Truth. No jokes. No mispronounced names. Just a stare. Locked in on Cena. Eyes cold. Steps deliberate. Cena laughed. Truth didn't. The moment lingered. Then, boom. Cena crumpled. The crowd? Silent. No music. No mic drop. Truth just stood there. One of the most beloved and misunderstood superstars in WWE history had just broken the nostalgia. So, why? Why would R-Truth, of all people, attack a living legend on one of the most emotional nights in wrestling? Because maybe, just maybe, Truth's tired of being the joke. This is a man who's been in WWE for 2 decades. A former NWA champion. A tag champion. A US champion. But when was the last time we took him seriously? Remember Capital Punishment 2011? R-Truth challenged John Cena for the WWE title. People thought it was filler. People laughed. Cena won. Truth faded. But in that silence, Truth stayed. He never left. Never complained. He showed up. Made us laugh. Took the bumps. Did the jobs. While others came and went. Truth endured. Maybe MITB wasn't just about Cena saying goodbye. Maybe it was Truth saying, "You forgot me." No promo. No catchphrase. Just action. Truth is back. But not the Truth you remember. Not the one who gets pinned for laughs. Not the one who waits for a mic to mispronounce WrestleMania. The man we laughed with for years just reminded us, he's not done. And he's done being overlooked. So now the question isn't why did R-Truth do it? It's this, who's next? The arena was electric. Not just loud, alive. The kind of buzz you only get when something sacred is happening. When a legend steps down, and for one brief moment, the noise becomes reverence. Madison Square Garden was full, wall to wall, and every fan inside knew they were about to witness history. Not just any match. Not just any goodbye. John Cena. The franchise. The constant. The one guy who never turned heel when it was easy. The 16-time world champion, standing in the middle of the ring at Money in the Bank 2025. Not as a challenger. Not as a fighter. But as a man closing the book. He waved. He bowed. He smiled like a man who had nothing left to prove, and everything to be grateful for. Then it happened. The lights didn't cut. The pyro didn't explode. The music hit. But it wasn't Cody Rhodes. It wasn't Roman. It wasn't Austin Theory. It wasn't Randy Orton coming to pass the torch in a final symbolic moment. It was R-Truth. Let that sit for a second. R-Truth. The comedy relief. The 24/7 hijacker. The guy who gets laughs, forgets match stipulations, and turns chaos into an art form. A beloved fool. A constant punchline. But this R-Truth wasn't smiling. No mic in hand. No song. No t-shirt promo or little Jimmy by his side. He walked. Slow. Straight. Stone-faced. Cena chuckled. Thought it was a bit. But this wasn't a bit. This was betrayal. In one sharp move, R-Truth dropped Cena with a perfectly timed corkscrew elbow to the head, and the building died. No joke. No post-hit dance. Just Cena flat on the mat. Truth, standing over him, breathing like a man who had just exhaled 20 years of frustration. People didn't know how to react. Some gasped. Some yelled. Most just stared. This wasn't a twist. It was a violation. Cena wasn't just a superstar. He was a symbol. A retirement. A ceremony. You don't interrupt a man's goodbye unless you're making a statement. And Truth? He made it loud without saying a word. We've seen betrayals in WWE before. Seth Rollins swinging the chair at Roman and Dean. Shawn Michaels superkicking Marty Jannetty. Even Hulk Hogan joining the NWO. But this? This was different. This didn't feel scripted. This felt personal. Not a rivalry. Not a heel turn. Not a gimmick shift. This felt like a man who finally snapped after being everyone's punchline for far too long. Like he looked at Cena, the golden boy of the modern era, getting a hero's farewell, and something inside him said, "What about me?" Because here's the truth, R-Truth has been in WWE longer than some champions have been alive. He's taken the bumps. Played the fool. Chased titles no one remembers. He's shown up every night, put smiles on faces, and been the MVP of backstage segments for over a decade. But he never got this. This send-off. This respect. This applause. And maybe that silence after the attack wasn't shock. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe we all knew, we overlooked a man who's been giving everything to this company while getting crumbs in return. So, what does this mean? What happens when the guy we laughed with stops laughing? What happens when R-Truth drops the comedy and picks up the mic, not to joke, but to speak? Because this wasn't a heel turn. Not in the cartoon sense. This was a reckoning. There was no punchline. No song. No meme to soften the blow. Just one man, walking down the ramp with every step saying, "I'm done being your joke." And when that elbow hit John Cena's temple, it wasn't just a move. It was a message. To WWE. To the fans. To the business. I was always here. And you never saw me. Now we do. And everything just changed. It was supposed to be a send-off. That's how the night was billed, how the commentary framed it, and how the crowd received it. Money in the Bank 2025 wasn't just another premium live event. It was going to be John Cena's final full-time appearance inside a WWE ring. Fans expected emotion, nostalgia, and maybe a little tearful closure. What they didn't expect, what nobody could have predicted, was that the loudest silence in wrestling history would be caused by R-Truth. The show had been solid up to that point. Great matches. High stakes. Classic Money in the Bank chaos. Then came the final segment. Cena stepped through the curtain one last time, the camera tight on his face. He looked relaxed, almost serene, like a man who had finally made peace with his legacy. He jogged to the ring, saluted the crowd, and for a brief moment, the noise inside the arena was deafening. Thousands chanting his name, kids holding up "never give up" signs, older fans standing in collective appreciation for a man they grew up watching. It was what Cena deserved. Everything felt final, but in the best possible way. He took the mic. No storyline. No kayfabe. Just John Cena, as himself, thanking the fans. He talked about the journey. About starting in 2002, about being told he'd never make it, about proving doubters wrong over and over again. He talked about the kids who grew up with him and the fans who stuck around through the boos and cheers. The camera cut to faces in the crowd, grown men misty-eyed, young fans listening like they were hearing a bedtime story. Cena spoke with the clarity of a man who had nothing left to achieve. The speech was perfect. And then everything shifted. The beat hit. Not Cena's theme. Not Cody Rhodes' music. Not Roman Reigns' tribal drums or Theory's arrogant stomp. It was R-Truth's entrance theme. Nobody moved. There was confusion at first, followed by disbelief. This had to be a joke, right? Truth has always been the guy who crashes segments, mixes up names, or starts rapping in the wrong moment. He's comic relief. This was just a bit. A final laugh to cap off an emotional night. Cena smiled, seemingly in on the joke. He mouthed "What's up?" with a chuckle, maybe expecting R-Truth to dance his way down, grab the mic, and mispronounce "Money in the Bank" one last time for old time's sake. But Truth wasn't smiling. He didn't dance. He didn't rap. He didn't even look at the crowd. He walked. Slowly. Eyes locked on Cena. Arms tense. Shoulders squared. That's when the mood in the arena changed. You could feel it, the sudden unease, like a static charge in the air. The laughter died before it even started. Truth stepped into the ring, and the commentary team went quiet. No jokes. No play-by-play. Just silence. Cena said something off mic, still believing it was a misunderstanding. He even reached out, half laughing, trying to pull Truth into a handshake or a hug. But Truth didn't stop moving. He didn't break eye contact. And then, in a single fluid motion, he spun and landed a stiff elbow directly to the side of Cena's head. Cena went down hard. The sound of that impact, the thud of elbow against skull, of body hitting canvas, echoed louder than any pop that night. And the crowd? Silent. Not in the way they go quiet during a rest hold. Not even in stunned awe like during Undertaker's streak ending. This was different. It was the kind of silence that lives in moments where people genuinely don't know what to do. Truth didn't follow up with a stomp or a chair shot. He didn't gloat. He didn't speak. He just stood over Cena's motionless body, breathing heavily, staring down at a man who represented everything he hadn't been given. There was no exit music. No replay package. No fade to black. The camera slowly pulled back, Cena still down, Truth unmoving, the WWE Universe unsure whether what they just saw was storyline or a real-life explosion of emotion 20 years in the making. Twitter erupted. WWE's official handle posted nothing for several minutes, unusual, considering they usually jump on shocking developments instantly. Fans scrambled to record crowd footage, upload reactions, dissect facial expressions. Wrestling journalists and insiders had no leaks, no hints, no prior indications that this was in the plans. Because if it was planned, they kept it under tighter wraps than anything in recent WWE history. Back in the arena, the mood turned from stunned silence to low-volume murmurs. Security didn't escort Truth. Referees didn't rush down to check on Cena. It wasn't clear whether this was part of the show or something else entirely. Commentary eventually returned, but their tone was far from normal. There was no fake outrage. No screaming "Why, Truth, why?" Just confusion. Muted concern. And questions, lots of them. Why now? Why Cena? And why R-Truth? Those were the first words trending within minutes. The show cut to black. No final package. No music. No farewell from the announce table. Just black. It's rare in wrestling, almost unheard of, for an ending to feel this unprocessed, this raw. But that's what made it land. The entire presentation stripped away the layers of performance we're used to. This didn't feel like sports entertainment. This felt real. And that's what made it powerful. As fans began to leave the arena, the energy wasn't electric. It wasn't joyful or sad. It was unsteady. Conversations sounded like those you hear after a serious accident. What just happened? Is he okay? Was that real? Because everything about the way Truth carried himself said this wasn't about getting heat. This wasn't about turning heel for a storyline. This was a statement. A man, long overlooked, using the most iconic stage and the most protected legend in the company to finally force people to pay attention. Not by talking. Not by dancing. Not by mispronouncing a pay-per-view. By putting John Cena down in front of the world. There's a reason nobody made jokes about it afterward. There were no punchlines trending. No gifs. No meme-worthy screenshots of a goofy Truth mugging for the camera. The internet didn't know how to process it. And WWE stayed silent for hours after the broadcast. Because what happened wasn't funny. It was a rupture. A spontaneous reminder that the guy you forgot about? The one you left in the mid-card to play the fool? He was always watching. And now he's stepping into the spotlight, not to play, but to break the system that made him invisible for so long. That's what the opening shock at Money in the Bank 2025 was about. Not just betrayal. Not just surprise. But transformation. A moment where the entire audience realized, almost in unison, that the man we never took seriously just took the company's biggest icon and dropped him without hesitation. And not a soul laughed. The Legends last night? John Cena was never supposed to be here this long. That's what they used to say. Back in 2002, when a young, square-jawed bodybuilder stepped up to Kurt Angle with ruthless aggression and spiky hair, few saw more than a developmental project. He had the physique, the look, the marketability, but this was an era where flash burned fast. Most thought he'd be gone in a year. Fast forward 23 years. 16 world championships. Countless Make-A-Wish visits. Main events. Record-setting merchandise. Generational influence. John Cena didn't just prove the doubters wrong, he redefined what it meant to be the face of WWE. And that's why Money in the Bank 2025 was never supposed to be about drama. It was a night reserved for gratitude. The rumors had been building for months. Cena's Hollywood schedule was stacked. His body had taken the toll. WrestleMania 41 came and went without a major program. And MITB 2025 had been subtly hyped as his final full-time appearance. No retirement banner. No official press release. Just whispers, loud enough to matter, soft enough to allow deniability. But to longtime fans, the signs were clear. Cena's entrance wasn't rushed. He wore a classic look, bright colors, jorts, old-school cap. But carried the calm energy of someone preparing for closure. He pointed to signs, tapped his chest, looked into the crowd for long stretches like he was soaking it in, one last time. And when the lights hit him under that spotlight, you could tell. He wasn't in character. He was just John. He stood in the middle of the ring and let the audience chant his name. Not "Let's go Cena, Cena sucks." Not the split crowd noise that followed him for most of the 2010s. This was universal. Sincere. Pure admiration. They gave him the flowers while he could still smell them. He took the mic. What followed wasn't a promo. It was a thank you letter in real time. Cena didn't boast. He didn't rehash rivalries. He just spoke with humility, gratefulness, and reflection. He talked about coming up with guys like Brock, Randy, and Batista. About nights on the road where nobody knew his name. About rising, falling, rising again. About giving everything to the fans because they gave everything to him. It wasn't about wins or titles. It was about the journey. And the crowd was right there with him. There wasn't a dry eye within 5 rows. People weren't watching a performer. They were watching a man say goodbye to the thing that shaped him. Cena has always been bulletproof in WWE lore. But on this night, he was vulnerable. Honest. Real. He spoke about his final matches. About younger talent taking over. About the cycle of the business. He smiled when he said he couldn't run the ropes like he used to. He joked about his hairline and knees, but even that humor came with the weight of truth. For all the time Cena was accused of being too corporate or too clean, this moment proved why he earned the right to be seen as something more. He wasn't just the face of WWE. He was its constant. And when he finished speaking, the crowd erupted into a chant that said everything. Thank you, Cena. He saluted them. Waved. Started to step back, ready to let the curtain fall on a career that had spanned 2 generations. And then the music hit. That music. And everything changed. For a brief second, it seemed like the perfect send-off would be followed by another legend. Maybe Randy Orton would show up, give Cena a hug, remind the crowd that rivalries are forever. Maybe Cody Rhodes would walk down to accept the torch. Maybe even Vince himself would make one final public appearance to honor the man who carried WWE through its toughest transition years. But no one expected R-Truth. There wasn't a soul in that building, or watching at home, who had even considered the possibility. It wasn't even on the radar. Why would it be? Cena had history with Orton, Edge, The Rock, Lesnar, Roman, CM Punk. Truth? Sure, they had crossed paths. There had been a WWE Championship match between them at Capital Punishment 2011. But that was a one-off. A mid-year program that came and went with barely a ripple in Cena's career narrative. So, when Truth's music hit, the initial reaction was confusion. Not shock. Not intrigue. Just confusion. Fans looked around like they had missed a setup or a backstage segment. The kind of moment where people instinctively check social media for context. Because this wasn't how the night was supposed to end. But Truth didn't come out laughing. He didn't jog. Didn't smile. No rapping. No joking. No mic. Just a slow, determined walk down the ramp. And Cena, still in the glow of an emotional high, laughed. Because why wouldn't he? To him, it was a callback. An old friend coming out to break the tension with some absurd bit to remind everyone that wrestling isn't always so serious. But Truth wasn't here for closure. He was here for correction. Because while Cena's legacy was being celebrated, Truth's had always been ignored. Cena stood tall in the spotlight while Truth stood in the shadows for over a decade. Cena got movie deals. Truth got joke segments. Cena got title runs. Truth got comedy awards. Cena got goodbyes. Truth got forgotten. And on that night, he made sure everyone remembered. He walked into Cena's farewell like a ghost of a past WWE would rather forget, and made his presence violently felt. There was no build. No feud. No slow-burning storyline. Just a man who'd been there the entire time finally stepping into someone else's moment and making it his own. And in doing so, he rewrote the ending. Because what was meant to be a celebration of John Cena's legacy became something else entirely, a referendum on how WWE treats its veterans. How some get the spotlight and some get the shadows. How some retire with reverence and some fade into parody. Cena fell. Truth stood. And the crowd didn't cheer. They didn't boo either. They just watched. Because whether they wanted to admit it or not, something about what they saw felt deserved. Not deserved in the sense that Cena earned an attack, but deserved in the sense that R-Truth had finally claimed a moment of truth in a company that had only let him joke. When Cena hit the mat, it wasn't just a bump. It was symbolic. The unshakable had been shaken. The untouchable had been touched. And the farewell that had been so carefully crafted, so delicately handled, was now in pieces on the floor of the ring. So, when people ask what happened that night, what made it so shocking, it wasn't just that R-Truth attacked John Cena. It was that he did it on the one night where everyone thought they knew exactly how the story would end. And now, that ending is gone. Cena's legacy remains. But it's no longer sealed. It's cracked. Because even legends can be blindsided. Even goodbyes can be stolen. And in the place where we expected closure, we got something else entirely. We got the beginning of a very different story. And the man telling it? Isn't the Cena we've known for 20 years. It's the truth we never saw coming. Who is R-Truth, really? To understand what happened at Money in the Bank 2025, you can't just focus on the moment. You have to look at the man. R-Truth, born Ron Killings, has existed in the wrestling business for longer than some of today's main eventers have been alive. But while his name has become synonymous with comedy, forgotten catchphrases, and mid-card chaos, the full story is more complicated. And frankly, more painful. Because what R-Truth did to John Cena wasn't just an attack. It was an overdue correction of the record. The mainstream WWE audience mostly knows Truth as a lovable buffoon. He's the guy who interrupts matches he's not booked in. The one who mistakes the Royal Rumble for Money in the Bank. The guy who tries to pin people in hotel lobbies for the 24/7 title and hides in bushes with referees. But Ron Killings wasn't born with a punchline in his pocket. He didn't start his wrestling journey making people laugh. He came up fighting to survive. Killings grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina, in poverty. His early years were rough. He didn't grow up idolizing Hulk Hogan or dreaming about WrestleMania. His goals were more immediate: put food on the table, stay out of jail, find a way out. In fact, he didn't even get into wrestling until after serving time. He was introduced to the business by Jack Crockett of Jim Crockett Promotions, and that connection turned into a shot at a completely new life. The irony is, Killings is one of the most athletic and naturally charismatic wrestlers of his era. His background in music, breakdancing, and street performance gave him a presence most guys have to train years to find. And once he got in the ring, it didn't take long for people to realize he had something. In 2002, while John Cena was debuting in WWE, Ron Killings was making history somewhere else. He became the first, and still only, black man to win the NWA World Heavyweight Championship while wrestling for TNA. At the time, it was a huge deal. Killings, wrestling as the Truth, cut promos that were raw, authentic, and brutally honest. He spoke about being overlooked, typecast, and disrespected in an industry that claimed to be inclusive but still locked its doors. His NWA title run wasn't a fluke. He could talk, move, work, and carry a segment. In many ways, he was ahead of his time. If you go back and watch those promos, you'll see a man speaking with fire and pain, not the polished goofball most WWE fans recognize today. When he returned to WWE in 2008, everything changed. Killings rebranded as R-Truth. The gimmick had shades of his real-life background, a man with street roots who used music to express himself. But in WWE's tightly packaged environment, that edge got sanded down. Over time, R-Truth became more character than competitor. He danced. He rapped. He brought little Jimmy into the ring and played to the absurd. It was entertaining. People laughed. He became beloved for his willingness to embrace chaos. But as the laughs got louder, the respect faded. He became what wrestling fans call a gimmick guy. Someone who's always there to pop a crowd, never to carry a title. And yet, he never complained. He never went on social media and buried the company. He didn't jump ship for AEW or demand a release. He stayed. Showed up. Did the segments nobody else wanted. took the falls, took the chairs, played the fool when no one else would. And maybe that's why fans forgot the other side of him. The side that could cut a serious promo. The side that once carried the top belt in a national promotion. The side that was once seen as a revolutionary. Because WWE, by design, made sure that part was buried beneath the bits. And let's be clear, there's no shame in being a comedic act. Truth embraced it and made it legendary. His run with the 24/7 championship became iconic. He made it matter when the title itself didn't. He made people laugh in segments that would have died in lesser hands. But with every joke, every mispronunciation, every confused run-in, something deeper was happening. R-Truth was building something most fans didn't see coming. Longevity. By the time he attacked Cena in 2025, R-Truth had quietly become one of the longest-tenured active performers in WWE history. 2 decades in, and his body was still in shape. His timing was still sharp. His presence, still commanding. But nobody was talking about that. They were still sharing clips of him forgetting ladder rules or rapping in the wrong city. So when he walked out at Money in the Bank without a mic or a smile, it wasn't just surprising. It was surreal. For the first time in years, fans saw the man, not the meme. Because behind every laugh, there had always been the undercurrent of something deeper. Resentment. Imagine watching the locker room fill with new stars every year, guys who jump the line, get the push, win the gold. Guys who come and go while you stay, loyal and reliable. Imagine watching your only title shots get treated like filler. Imagine being used to warm up the crowd but never headline the show. Now imagine you've been watching Cena, the poster boy, get everything you didn't. And then imagine being told he's getting a grand farewell, a moment to bask in the legacy, the spotlight, the love. And realizing, that moment will never come for you. That's who walked down the ramp that night. Not the dancing fool. Not the comic relief. But a man who was tired. Tired of smiling for people who never took him seriously. Tired of showing up just to make others look good. Tired of being the best-kept secret in WWE while everyone else got their highlight reel. So when he dropped Cena, it wasn't just a swerve. It was a statement. Not for a storyline. For himself. R-Truth, the man most people forgot to count among the greats, reminded everyone why he should have never been counted out in the first place. He wasn't just a comedy act. He was a pioneer. A trailblazer. A world champion. A survivor in an industry that burns through people like cheap fireworks. And now he's done pretending that the joke never hurt. Because under every joke was a man asking the same question, when's it going to be my turn? And now, he's not asking anymore. He's taking it. There was a moment, long before the comedy, before Little Jimmy, before the hotel room title defenses and invisible ladders, when R-Truth stood toe-to-toe with John Cena for the richest prize in professional wrestling. The year was 2011. The event was Capital Punishment. And for a brief window of time, Ron Killings, a man who had spent years fighting for legitimacy, stood at the very top of the WWE card. And most people don't even remember it happened. Capital Punishment was one of WWE's more forgettable pay-per-views. Held in Washington, D.C. The show featured an awkward political theme, complete with parody press conferences and fake Barack Obama segments. But buried beneath the strangeness of the marketing was a main event that should have meant more than it did. John Cena vs. R-Truth for the WWE Championship. On paper, it was a big deal. Truth had just turned heel after years of playing the mid-card babyface. His turn was effective, darker, more unhinged. He wore suits, dropped sinister promos, talked to invisible children. It wasn't classic heel work. It was weird. And it worked because it was authentic. Truth didn't pretend to be evil. He was angry. The story was built on one thing, being overlooked. In the weeks leading up to the event, Truth delivered promos that blurred the line between character and reality. He talked about always being pushed aside. About being good enough to get a shot, but never good enough to win it. About fans chanting for others while he broke his back for applause he never got. He accused Cena of being the golden boy. The company's chosen one. The guy who smiled, sold shirts, and stole attention while others did the dirty work. And he wasn't wrong. That's what made the feud land harder than it should have. It wasn't a classic rivalry. There was no personal betrayal. No long-standing blood feud. Just a man who had waited too long for his moment, and another man who represented everything he couldn't have. But here's the truth most people missed. Capital Punishment 2011 wasn't just another title defense for Cena. It was R-Truth's first and only one-on-one WWE Championship match. Think about that. A man who's been with the company off and on since 2000. A man with the charisma, athleticism, and experience to hang with anyone. And he got exactly one clean title shot on pay-per-view. It wasn't built like an epic. It wasn't treated with reverence. The booking never gave Truth the credibility of a true threat. He came out talking to the crowd, playing up the little Jimmy angle. Cena made jokes. The tone was uneven. And in the end, Truth lost. Not in a hard-fought, career-defining loss. He was pinned after a simple distraction, a water-throwing kid in the crowd. No finisher chain. No nail-biting near falls. Just a splash of water, a roll-in, an attitude adjustment, and a 3 count. The moment he finally reached the top of the mountain, WWE turned it into a punchline. It wasn't an accident. It was a message. Even at your peak, even when we give you the spotlight, you're still the joke. And the crowd laughed. Not at Truth's jokes. At him. The main event of Capital Punishment didn't elevate R-Truth. It reminded everyone watching that he wasn't meant to be taken seriously. He didn't get a rematch. He didn't get a redemption arc. He drifted, like so many talented stars do when the machine decides it's done pretending. But he didn't leave. That's the part that matters. He stayed. He went back to work. He kept cutting promos, kept dancing, kept being the guy WWE asked him to be. He reinvented himself into the comedic mainstay we know today. And he did it with the same energy as someone trying to headline again. But somewhere, deep down, you have to believe Capital Punishment never left him. How could it? Imagine being told you're not worth the investment. That your real, personal story isn't dramatic enough. That your pain is only useful if it makes people laugh. That's what Truth was forced to accept in 2011. He showed up at the peak of his storytelling power, ready to finally get his moment, and WWE turned it into a skit. Cena didn't need to cheat. Didn't need to struggle. The company didn't need to protect Truth's credibility. Because they weren't planning to keep him in the main event. He was a chapter. Cena was the book. And the chapter ended without meaning. Most fans never revisited that match. It didn't make highlight reels. It's not on top 10 Cena matches lists. It didn't make a dent in either man's legacy, until now. Because when R-Truth walked out at Money in the Bank 2025, he wasn't just confronting the man. He was confronting the memory. The reminder of the one time he was given a real shot, and how little it meant in the end. MITB 2025 wasn't about revenge for a storyline. It was closure for a career that never got its due. R-Truth didn't just attack John Cena. He erased Capital Punishment 2011 from history. And replaced it with something nobody will forget. A new main event. A new statement. And maybe, finally, a new beginning. Somewhere along the line, R-Truth became a guaranteed laugh. You could put him on any card, in any segment, and the crowd would smile. He was the guy who could revive a dying crowd in 30 seconds. The guy who could walk into the middle of a serious promo, forget the stipulation, or start rapping out of nowhere, and somehow make it work. He became a legend in that lane. A specialist in the absurd. A master of the mid-segment surprise. But ask yourself this, when was the last time anyone took him seriously? The answer reveals something uncomfortable. For all the love Truth has received, for all the laughter and goodwill, it never came with real respect. Not the kind you give to the ones who headline WrestleMania. Not the kind you give to the stars whose names are carved into the history books in bold, not fine print. WWE fans love R-Truth. But they don't respect him as a threat. Not because he can't go in the ring. He absolutely can. Not because he lacks charisma. He's overflowing with it. Not because he doesn't have history, talent, or resume. He has all of that. It's because he's been typecast. And worse, he became complicit in his own typecasting. To understand how it happened, you have to go back. After his one and only WWE title shot in 2011 ended with a joke finish, Truth pivoted. He didn't sulk. He didn't disappear. He evolved. He turned the weirdness up. Started leaning into the surreal. Created Little Jimmy, an imaginary child no one could see but him. Most wrestlers wouldn't survive something like that. Truth thrived. He sold every moment. Made people care about an invisible character. Created catchphrases. Built an entire psychology around something only he could see. It was ridiculous and brilliant. Truth made himself essential. Not in the title picture, but in WWE's entertainment machinery. If you needed levity, if a show needed a soft reset between big matches, Truth was the man you called. And WWE did call. Again and again. For backstage skits. For comic relief during serious feuds. For surprise run-ins that made no sense but always got a pop. Over time, that became his lane. Not by failure, but by effectiveness. Truth was too good at making people laugh. So WWE kept him there. That's how he became the face of the 24/7 championship. A title that, by design, was built for chaos. For surprise roll-ups, hotel brawls, golf course finishes, airport ambushes. The belt wasn't meant to matter, but Truth made it matter. He turned a meaningless title into a fan-favorite segment. He held it a record 54 times. Not because of booking logic. Because the fans never got tired of it. He made himself the heartbeat of that belt. But even in that success, something was lost. Every 24/7 segment, every confused entrance, every mispronounced name, they reinforced the same idea. R-Truth isn't here to win. He's here to make you smile while other people chase glory. And the longer it went on, the deeper that perception dug in. Commentators stopped talking about Truth like a threat. Wrestlers stopped treating him like one. Matches with him were novelty acts. Fans stopped asking what if, when it came to title runs or serious angles. That part of his career, the part where he was once a world champion in TNA, a dangerous promo, a legit contender, got buried under the bits. He became the guy you could safely beat. The one who'd sell your finisher like a cartoon. The one who could eat the pin without it hurting his credibility, because by that point, credibility wasn't even part of the conversation. In the most brutal sense of the word, R-Truth became safe. And that's where respect dies in wrestling. Because fans might love you, but if they don't fear you, you're just the warm-up act. Even as Truth continued to rack up television time. More than most mid-carders, more than some champions, he was rarely ever in a position of consequence. If Truth was in a match, you knew it wouldn't affect the title scene. If he was in a segment, you knew it would end with a laugh. He became WWE's comedic insurance policy. He made it look easy. Too easy. And so people forgot how hard it is to do what he does. How hard it is to stay over in a role that changes every week. How difficult it is to make absurd material land every time. How rare it is to be that universally beloved without ever turning heel again or riding a wave of fan backlash. They forgot because he never broke character. But at what cost? Respect in wrestling isn't just about wins. It's about aura, threat, consequence. Guys like Bray Wyatt, Kevin Owens, Gunther, they had presence. They could lose and still be seen as dangerous. Truth could win and still be treated like a sideshow. And the tragedy is, he never resented the role publicly. Never complained in interviews. Never took shots at creative. He did the job, week after week, year after year. Until MITB 2025. That's when it broke. That's when the mask came off, not the literal one, but the one he wore every time he danced down the ramp with a smile that said, "I'm just here for fun." Because he wasn't just there for fun. Not anymore. He was there to rewrite what people thought they knew. He was there to demand respect the only way WWE ever truly listens, through action. And by dropping Cena, clean, sudden, and without a single word, he burned down the image WWE had spent years crafting around him. He reminded everyone that behind the punchlines was a man who had paid his dues longer than most. Who had drawn blood. Taken chair shots. Carried segments that should have died. A man who had done everything right, except ask for more. Until that night. When he took it. That wasn't a heel turn. It was a credibility correction. Not just in the eyes of the fans. In his own. What if it was all part of the plan? That's the question that started circulating across social media just hours after R-Truth shocked the world and attacked John Cena. At first, it sounded like grasping. Desperate fans trying to make sense of a moment that felt so out of character it had to be scripted. But then people started digging. Watching old clips. Rewatching backstage segments. Listening closer to promos. And slowly, the theory started to build. Maybe this wasn't a random outburst. Maybe WWE has been laying the groundwork for over a decade. Let's be clear, WWE is no stranger to long-term storytelling. The Bloodline saga unfolded over 3 years and touched nearly every major character in the company. Seth Rollins' heel turn on the Shield was foreshadowed. Bray Wyatt's Fiend persona was seeded years before it emerged. But if R-Truth's turn at Money in the Bank 2025 was part of a long game, it would be the quietest, most disguised build WWE has ever pulled off. And maybe its most brilliant. Start with his comedic rise. The Little Jimmy gimmick felt ridiculous at the time. But go back and watch the promos. Truth wasn't just playing crazy. He was venting. Talking about invisible friends, yes, but also about being betrayed, mocked, underestimated. There's a dark undercurrent in those segments, a sense that Truth didn't invent Little Jimmy for laughs. He invented him because he had no one else in his corner. Every time someone laughed, he became more of a joke. And more isolated. Over the years, WWE never let him shed the comedy. But they let him get weirder. He became erratic. Talking to himself. Misunderstanding match types. Showing up in places he didn't belong. People called it funny. But when you map it out over time, a different picture starts to form. It wasn't just Truth being goofy. It was a man breaking down, piece by piece, in front of the world. The 24/7 championship era drove it home. Truth became obsessed with the belt. Not like other superstars who used it as a stepping stone, but like someone who needed it for survival. He'd pin people in parking lots, under tables, in the middle of weddings. He'd disguise himself, manipulate people, form brief alliances only to betray them seconds later. The belt was always slipping away. But he kept chasing it. Like a man trying to catch respect through comedy. And WWE let it happen. Week after week, they gave Truth airtime. They let him talk. Let him act. Let him show a different version of a descent. It wasn't downward spiral storytelling in the usual sense. It was hidden in plain sight. Fans loved him for it. And that was the trick. WWE gave you just enough absurdity that you never stopped to consider the emotional cost. You saw the laughs. Not the loneliness. You saw the antics. Not the desperation. But go back. Listen closely. In those backstage promos, between the jokes and slapstick, there's always something a little off. A moment where truth stops smiling. A beat too long. A breath that feels heavy. A sentence that trails off before becoming another punchline. That wasn't random. That was a seed. And the company never let it grow, until MITB 2025. That's where this theory flips from interesting to undeniable. Because there's no better time to break a character than when nobody expects it. And there's no better target than the man who's been the face of the company you've been serving without recognition for 2 decades. Cena's farewell was Truth's perfect storm. Cena got the moment. Truth got the motive. And WWE got the payoff, if, indeed, this was always the plan. Look at the visual composition of the moment. Truth walks out slowly. No music change. No camera shake. No commentary cues. That silence wasn't just real, it was designed. The production didn't cut away. They lingered. Cena's smile. Truth's stare. The slow realization. The moment of violence. And then stillness. If this were a random heel turn, it wouldn't have been that carefully executed. It was cinematic. Deliberate. Even the way Truth moved was different. No flair. No bounce. No wasted motion. Just precision. That's not how a man acts when he's winging it. That's how a man acts when he's waited too long and doesn't plan on missing. The framing was too perfect for this to be spontaneous. So maybe this was WWE's longest game. A character arc hidden behind comedy. A payoff buried beneath years of misdirection. Think about how many times we've seen Truth get knocked down. How many matches he's lost. How many times he's smiled while taking the fall. How often he showed up to play the fool so others could shine. And maybe every single one of those was a step in the build. Not to a title run. Not to a comeback. But to a moment. This moment. The slap in the face to everyone who laughed too hard. The shot heard round the industry. And now it's all flipped. Because here's the terrifying part of the theory, if this was the plan all along, what else have we missed? How many other jokes were messages? How many other Truth promos were veiled cries for recognition? How many mistakes were warning signs? It would mean WWE turned the idea of long-term storytelling inside out. Instead of hyping it with Easter eggs and callbacks, they buried it beneath the mask of comedy. They let fans ignore it, until they couldn't. And if that's true, then R-Truth just became one of the most intricately built characters in modern wrestling history. It wouldn't just be a return to seriousness. It would be vindication. Proof that, while everyone else was chasing title shots and feuds, Truth was doing something rarer, becoming inevitable. All without your permission. Because you left. And that was the point. In pro wrestling, fans are trained to look for signs. A subtle glance. A tension-filled handshake. A backstage promo where someone says just a little too much. Long-term storytelling thrives on these crumbs. When the payoff comes, we look back and connect the dots. But sometimes, the dots are so small, you don't even know they're there until the whole picture punches you in the face. That's what R-Truth gave us. A slow, almost invisible build toward something serious. But we missed it. Because we weren't looking. And that may be the most brilliant part of what's unfolding now, how R-Truth changed, week by week, piece by piece, without the audience ever realizing he was transitioning from a clown to a crisis waiting to explode. Start with the gear. It used to be bright. Neon colors. Loose-fitting pants. T-shirts with catchphrases and cartoony energy. But over the past year, it got darker. More muted tones. Blacks. Grays. Fewer graphics. The change was subtle, gradual. Not enough to draw attention, but enough to send a message if you were watching closely: this isn't the same Truth you remember. Even his entrances changed. They used to be full of bounce, arms out, high fives, dancing steps, rapping his way to the ring. Slowly, that routine got cut down. The rap became shorter, sometimes skipped altogether. The dance stopped happening every time. Truth started walking to the ring more often than jogging. Was it fatigue? Age? Or was it restraint? Because he still performed when the segment called for it. But there were moments, especially in the last few months, where he looked like a man going through the motions. Like someone wearing his own gimmick, like a costume he couldn't take off. The eyes said it all. There's a look veterans get when they've seen too much. A kind of stare that doesn't follow the camera anymore. It just cuts through the noise. Watch Truth backstage in some of his most recent segments before Money in the Bank. He'd deliver the lines. He'd hit the timing. But in those last few seconds, when everyone else is walking away or laughing, he'd stand still for just a breath too long. It's the kind of thing you only notice in hindsight. Like someone waiting for the lights to go out before finally saying what he really thinks. Then there were the interviews. Not the in-character ones. The off-screen podcast appearances. The WWE Network features. You'll find moments where he says things like, "I still got it," or "I'm waiting for that next chance." Sometimes he smiles after. Sometimes he doesn't. Sometimes he says it like a joke. Sometimes he doesn't even try to hide the truth inside it. In one 2024 interview, when asked about his dream opponent, he said, "I want someone who sees me for what I actually am, not what I've been playing." It didn't make headlines. But it should have. Because that sentence wasn't a throwaway. It was a confession. Then there was the night he teamed with The Miz in a random tag match on Raw. Nothing special. Throwaway booking. But if you watch that match closely, you'll notice something strange. Miz cuts the promo. Truth doesn't say a word. In the match, Truth tags in once, hits a few fast moves, tags out. The camera catches him afterward, not celebrating with Miz, but looking down the ramp like he's waiting for something, or someone. No storyline followed. No feud came out of it. But moments like that started stacking. There was a backstage segment on SmackDown earlier in 2025 where Truth walked into the frame during a promo between two rising stars. He wasn't scheduled to appear in the angle. He said something offbeat and walked away. The crowd laughed, as always. But one of the stars, Ridge Holland, broke character for a split second. He looked at Truth, not with confusion, but almost with pity. The moment passed. But again, in hindsight, it stands out. Because what if these weren't random appearances? What if WWE was showing us a man constantly on the edges of other people's stories, never centered in his own? There was even a social media post, one that's since been deleted, where Truth posted a selfie in an empty arena. The caption read, "Always here. Even when y'all don't see me." Fans thought it was just a motivational quote. But it was something more. It was a warning. Even the creative decisions support this theory. Why keep him active on television with no real storylines? Why continue to use him in skits if he's just a comedy guy? Because maybe, someone backstage saw the long game. Maybe a producer, a writer, or even Truth himself pitched the slowest burn in WWE history. A quiet revolt wrapped in humor. A time bomb disguised as slapstick. The small changes, the tonal shifts, the silences, they weren't accidents. They were the smoke before the fire. And now the explosion has happened. That one moment at Money in the Bank, when he stepped into Cena's ring, didn't come from nowhere. It came from years of build-up nobody noticed. Years of being on the margins. Years of playing it safe. Years of giving more than he got back. It came from layers of subtle frustration played out in public. And now it's easy to ask, why didn't we see it? The answer is uncomfortable. Because we weren't looking. We were too busy laughing. Too distracted by the gimmicks. Too sure of what we thought our truth was. We assumed we knew his ceiling. We were wrong. And now that ceiling is shattered. So, when truth stood over Cena, not smiling, not talking, just breathing. It wasn't the start of something new. It was the reveal of something that had been happening for years. Right in front of us. And we missed it.